Welcome to the Rugged Human Podcast, where we explore the many facets of growth.
I came into this world with fighter warrior archetype.
Business and entrepreneurship.
The military was interesting for me.
All while finding our own unique life balance.
Wasn't going to help me figure out who the heck I was.
I'm your host, Jared Foose. I'll be speaking with thought leaders, business owners, creatives, and experts in their fields.
This was a failure for me.
To gain their insights and perspectives on finding balance in their lives.
I ended up homeless in Montana.
As well as inspiring stories of individuals who have overcome their own challenges.
What's going to happen when I get on an aircraft carrier? I screwed up the landing, retreated to a very dark place. I needed somebody to love. I had nothing.
Clio Carroll, welcome to the Rugged Human Podcast. Anyway, Clio, thanks for showing up and being on the podcast. I just wanted to kind of give you a quick little intro and just talk a little bit more about your story. And that's really why I wanted to get you on. Is
Sure.
that you kind of had a tough upbringing. You grew up in the Northeast and you made your way into the military, and then at that point you got through the military. You ended up becoming a single mother, and you've really persevered. You've gone through some tough times, and you've turned yourself into a very successful young entrepreneur. In the real estate business down in the middle of North Carolina in the Pinehurst area. That's kind of near Fort Bragg. A lot of the military. I think special operations folks are down there. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All the boys and girls are here.
So anyway, that's kind of, that's my version of your story. But I'd really love to hear, what your version of it. Why don't you give me a little bit about you as, from your perspective, and then we can start there. How about that? Sure.
I think I came into this world with kind of that fighter warrior archetype and that hyper independent. If someone can't do this for me, I'll figure out a way to do it myself. I'm in the special operations forces part here, and something I've learned saying is we're still in the fight. And I think about my life that way. I just always stayed in the fight. Mm-hmm. From the beginning, and that's something I'm grateful for. That started from the time I was 10 when I wanted a new lacrosse stick and a North Face backpack, and it wasn't happening at home. So I found a job on a farm in my hometown and would ride my bike there and pick vegetables. The military was interesting for me. Growing up in the Northeast in a blue state in a wealthy town, that wasn't something that was talked about. We took the SAT, we didn't take the ASVAB. And when I went down to University of Maryland for college, I got introduced to the U.S. Naval Academy because it was in Annapolis, close to my school, and got to know some of the people there. I remember really enjoying the camaraderie. And at the time, I thought my trajectory was just going to be to go make a lot of money. Inside this warrior, there was a sadness, an emptiness of the heart, and really feeling just like I was never anything, but always fighting to figure that out. And things got so bad for me that I realized just going to work on Wall Street or in the DC area wasn't going to help me figure out who the heck I was. So I made the crazy choice to drive myself to Montana and join this trail building AmeriCorps group out there called the Montana Conservation Corps. It's part of AmeriCorps. And what you do is you go work on federal lands. So National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, et cetera. And you build trails with your bare hands in the woods. This was a failure for me. I totally jacked that up. I didn't last more than 2 months because I was doing my Lindsay Lohan thing, and we'll talk about that later. But I ended up homeless in Montana. That was the first time I experienced having to go on public assistance. I went and I got food stamps and learned about that process and got off of those pretty quickly. That for me was like a very much a character shaping experience. Growing up in a wealthy white suburb, I always thought I was the poor kid. When you're in Billings, Montana, and people are living in single wides with holes in them, you get a new perspective and gratitude on life. That was character shaping. I was the girl who had something called depression that everybody thought was just me feeling sorry for myself, who disappeared. One of the things I tried to do when I got to that point of homelessness was join the Air National Guard in Montana and become a crew chief on F-16s. There was something about flying I'd always loved. It went back to my dad building jet engines growing up in Connecticut. I love the smell of coolant.
Let me guess. Pratt and Whitney?
How did you know?
I grew up in Connecticut.
You start from Connecticut. And I remember the air shows and I remember going to MAPS, the Military Entrance Processing Center in Butte, Montana. It's not but, it's Butte. And I broke down there to the dock and I was like, I'm not doing too hot mentally. And he's like, all right, well, we're not gonna be able to let you in the Air National Guard. So I go back to Billings, keep working my 3 jobs, start digging myself out of that hole and decide it's time to go back to the East. And ended up through one connection from business school at Maryland, getting a job running a physical therapy office in New Jersey. Very low self-esteem. I'd gotten myself to the point of using food to soothe. So I was 50 pounds overweight. And that was a painful time because that was when I really realized the people who I thought were my friends in college were not going to show up. Ended up being just an amazing experience. And again, something that shaped me for the trials I would face later.
Yeah.
I did a total rebuild. There was a lot more opportunity for income in South Jersey than in Montana. They're saying in Montana, you can't eat the scenery. I did not care about social life. I didn't have the self-esteem for a social life. Just wasn't really a thing for me. I was just trying to survive. And I think there's beauty in that. And you can't afford a garbage can, so you're using grocery bags, and you're trash picking at night on walks. And so that's what's interesting about my story. In total, my military experience is only 2.5 years. I'm going to be really transparent about it. A lot of people aren't, but I'm going to be. Because I think people who don't make it, especially women, need to understand that it's not their fault.
Right.
And it's important to know that the way that I really figured out who I was during this time and during my time in Montana, not when I had a bunch of friends and appeared to be cool. Okay. It was this time. And it's interesting because I figured out I was cool. I mean, I was about it, listening to Top Gun every day, and I ended up getting a pilot slot with the Navy. And I didn't know about balance then. So I was just hitting walls, right? Just tired. I get into the Navy and it was interesting, like things kind of fell apart for me as from a focus standpoint because I was so out of my element that I had to go back to old ways of coping to try to fit in. And despite the fact that I excelled physically and academically, there was already a spotlight on me because I was a female and because I was going for an elite career path. But part of my authentic self is being silly and fun. And when you add the fact that I was drinking with the boys to that, I was a little bit rowdy. Yeah. And the command noticed that.
What was the culture like? I mean, how did you, as a young woman in the military, how did you start handling that? What were your, tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So to be honest, I'd always been a girl who was friends with the guys. And I don't mean in a way that like, not oh yeah, so she slept with all of them, so they liked her. I did well becoming friends with my peers. Those guys respected me because they knew what I had done before I came in. It was the leadership, the old heads of the Navy that saw me and were like, she's not taking this seriously.
Right.
And they couldn't see what was in my heart, right? Because all they saw was this bubbly blonde girl. And I didn't understand what I was putting out there. I had no idea. So I got assigned for actual flight school. First, you do a series of academics and survival training. And then you get assigned to where you're going to do your primary flight training. Yeah. And the quote unquote bad place to go is go train with the Air Force in Oklahoma as a pilot or Marine Corps pilot. So they assigned that to me. Part of the reason that I was trying to do this and become an F-18 fighter pilot in the Navy was I thought my parents would finally be proud of me. And I think we can all relate to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if these people, no matter what, will never be proud of you? That was something I hadn't understood yet. So I'm trying to rebuild this relationship with them. So when I'm moving from Pensacola to Oklahoma, I decide to reroute to the Northeast and try to reconnect. It was a flapping disaster. There was domestic violence. There was all kind of stuff that went down. And I checked in 24 hours later at flight school. Didn't think that maybe I should tell the command, hey, can I take 30 days and class up with the next folks? I just came in swinging, and my coping mechanism for my home life had always been going out and getting blasted. And it's very easy to do that in the military culture because the drug of choice is alcohol, and anything relating to mental health has a stigma and will get you promptly kicked out of the military. So what do? We party about it. And I pretty much frank the tank when it comes to that. So I was doing great. What was the perception of the command around me? Not serious. Doesn't care about this. Didn't go well for me. I got an instructor pilot who, again, I'm just being trained by Marines right and left. The only Marine left on this base. He would scream at me before we flew. How do you think I did in the jet? Not great. Couldn't keep it together in the jet. I was also getting a little bit of harassment from my team leader. I brought that to the command. What they did was they took me out of my class that I was in and put me kind of in this bunker on the base. That was at the point I met this Air Force colonel who I was working for, who gave me this book about the fact that failure is what defines us, and there's gratitude in failure. It's not in our successes. They ended up giving me a second shot. I turned into kind of a robot on post. I felt like I couldn't trust anyone. So I get reclassed with a new instructor pilot, the nicest, most laid back Navy pilot ever. I flew really well with him. And then they said, okay, we're going to put you on your pre-solo. Like, we're going to check to see if you can ride in this jet solo. You're going to fly with our flight commander. So I'm flying with Big Daddy, flight commander. I'm in the jet, and I botched the first landing, and I had my second shot when I was coming back to our base. And I remember sitting in there, my oxygen mask on, my helmet on, and I thought to myself, do I really want to be here, and do these people want me here? What's going to happen when I get on an aircraft carrier? How's that going to work out for me? And I gave up. I screwed up the landing, and I got put into good old military transition holding. This whole plan I had for myself is straight falling apart. This thing that's going to turn me into the person that I want to be, it's not happening. Retreated to a very dark place inside. Some things happened at supply school that led to me ending up in inpatient psych ward for a couple days, with a diagnosis that made me unfit for duty and also meant I could never fly again on the civilian side. Deep, dark hole, man. And the next couple years after that, before I became a mother and became the entrepreneur I am today, did a very interesting, unconventional rebuilding. One of the ways that I coped with the loneliness of this darkness with the Navy was getting married very quickly to somebody who ended up being very abusive. I still maintain I needed him. I needed somebody to love. I had nothing. My parents are not loving people. There's been no financial support, no moral support. That's not something I had. I had no community in the Navy because I didn't trust anyone. I got married to somebody who was probably at the same level of darkness I was, or deeper, but I had somebody. And when I got out, it's like, man, I just don't know what to do. What did I used to like to do? So I got back into waitressing and bartending, which is something I'd always enjoyed the hustle of. I'm a caretaker. I love making people happy and bringing that party without actually being part of it. It was actually kind of a cool, healthy way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And And I got healthy enough that I was able to leave the abusive relationship. Unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, the partying continued because I was in this industry where that's part of it.
Right.
Work hard, play hard. It was very empowering because I was surrounded by women, and we were supporting each other and lifting each other up. And it was all women who didn't come from anything. That was what I needed. I didn't feel like that when I was in the military. That was what I went in for. I went in to lead people, to serve my country, and I lost that. And these people will come into our lives until we learn the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
So this was to be my lesson. I ended up in North Carolina, essentially trapped with somebody, and I very quickly became pregnant. And that was the day my life turned around. I said to myself, this is okay for me. This is not okay for my future child. And I'll add to that, I always knew I wanted to be a mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so excited. I went to this little country real estate school and figured out a way to get my license, realized all the talent I had, became a leader in my class. I started building a community. The women in my class showed up for me and gave me a place to stay when I was pregnant and couldn't be with the abuser anymore. When I had my daughter, I set up housing through the VA. It just gave me this even greater strength of will, and then this will to start doing even further inner work. I was going to put down roots. I brought back the focus I had used getting into the Navy and building that resume. I remember blowing a tire out and thinking, well, there goes my first commission check.
Yeah.
All these things started coming together from my experience. I wanted to learn everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, like, did I even care about a social life? No, I have my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm building a career, and that'll come later, and I'm gaining financial stability. The hole that I'd been filling with substances and food for so long taught me about balance. I know God's always been with me through this, and forging that relationship has been part of the growth as an entrepreneur. And it's interesting to be seen that way, because I just kind of saw myself as someone who kept trying, and okay, this is what I'm going to do today. I'm just going to wake up and do this. I don't know. Do you have any, where can we go from here, Jared?
Yeah, well, there's a lot there is a lot to unpack there, Clio. And I've got some pretty specific questions that have come up that I'd love to get your take on. The first being is you obviously you talked about this dark place that you were in an emotional level, and it sounds like at a spiritual level too. The first question I would have for you, how did you recognize that enough to do something about it? And then B is, how do you use spiritual tools and emotional tools to move through these issues that you obviously move through, and you might help somebody else?
Well, let's start by one of my favorite quotes is, it takes courage to show weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Use your resources. I always reached out. How can I get help? Like, let me find a therapist in this nowhere town in Montana to at least keep me alive.
Right.
Let me read books. I read books about the warrior ethos. I read cognitive behavioral books because I knew something was wrong. I learned this principle with my first experience with a 12-step program when I was still in college, which was pray for the people that you're mad at. This concept of prayer, gratitude, my spiritual practices have greatly elevated. It's all from using the resources that are available, the free resources, the resources that sometimes we have to pay for. I would say my non-negotiables are staying sober and taking my meds. Be open about it. They gave me meds in the Navy. I've been taking those things for 10 years. I'm not trying to stop. And then the sobriety part, when that goes away, how can I stay close to God? Because I'll disconnect from my soul. How do I stay connected to God? I think there are so many ways. Can you be quiet? There's different, and they, be a seeker. Look into different spiritual paths and see how it sits with you. Yeah. Try the weird stuff. Go to weird yoga classes, try Reiki. Like, come on, we're trying to get well here, whatever it takes, right?
Right.
What works for me is a practice that's it's called Kundalini yoga.
Okay.
And it's a lot of breathing and different exercises that help to keep you in alignment, which means in alignment with your heart and your soul and your body. I don't go with what other people say because I've realized it doesn't matter.
Right.
If I'm not, that's the biggest thing is I see all these people trying to follow rules and trying to do it this way or that way. And it's like, if you hear something that resonates with you, do that.
There is a will there to make things happen. So when you're in a tough spot, how did you always keep moving forward? You had that idea that, I'm just not going to stop. I'm always going to take some kind of an action to do something, right. Whether it was asking for help, you mentioned that, whether it was improving yourself, continuous learning, maybe not named per se the way I would name them, but that's definitely what I see. So determination and perseverance are specific to anybody that's seen any success in their life. How do you continue to motivate yourself, and how do you continue to persevere even when the times are tough?
Made a decision that things could be better. I have hope.
There's always... you reframed things. You just said, I'm making a decision. I'm going to look at this differently, and I'm going to do it.
Yep, I'm going to do it. There's something to be said for if you feel like you don't have that, getting really hard on yourself. Like, what am I going to do? Finding that warrior in you, you got to hit bottom sometimes.
It's funny. I was literally just working on this section of a course today, and one of the things that I'm talking about is one of the concepts of stoicism in a lot of things, and I'm hearing some of that come through here. But the concept of accepting what you cannot change is a big part of the Stoic philosophy, and a lot of 12-step work, like I've heard you mention a couple of times, in a lot of these programs. It's a very solid principle because so many times we think that we can change things when we absolutely cannot, and we don't see that.
Yes, and that has grown greatly for me.
Yeah.
Self-forgiveness and self-compassion is something I found by reaching out to those resources, because being hard on myself is part of what got me here. I'm grateful for that piece of me, but it doesn't always jive, because then sometimes you're so hard on yourself, you're forgetting, hey, that wasn't something I could have controlled.
Right. Right.
And that human aspect, how long did I think to myself, if I had been stronger, the things my parents did wouldn't have hurt me. I'm just a weak person.
Right.
That's not true.
And coming to that realization, realizing that is in and of itself a massive win in any personal growth story, right?
But the only way you're going to get there is by getting up every day and building your foundation. And something that I've always done is I've put finances first. If I can't pay my bills, I'm not doing anything.
Right.
If I don't have a roof, and being very humble about it. You need to shop at Walmart and rent a room, you damn well better be doing that. Like, I think a lot of people are really soft. I don't know if this is good, I'm saying this or not, but like, be willing to do whatever it takes. Understand there's always a way. We live in, and this is going to come off, this is just what I believe. I believe we live in the greatest country in the world.
Okay.
I do. And I believe that if you cannot make it here, where the heck can you make it? If you are willing to sacrifice.
Yeah.
And like, no, not everybody's going to have a 2,500 square foot house with air conditioning. You might be in a room with a box air conditioner for a little while. But you can move up. We don't have caste systems here. Yes, we have a disparity of wealth and poverty. I believe that if you are willing to be humble in the way that you live, you can come back from anything. And you will find your community. You might lose the people who weren't really your friends.
It takes a long time to learn. People put their trust in the wrong people. They rely on other people's opinions on things like that. And they don't do enough self-examination to find out the true strength within themselves.
Ooh, I just really quick. Time alone.
Take your time.
Time alone, guys. Why are we going to parties that we don't want to go to with fake people, when we could be spending time unwinding from all our hard work and continuing to discover ourselves?
That's
something I see all the time.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. So tell me a little bit about the business part, because I don't understand that part of it. I definitely don't understand, some of the struggles that people go through in the military. How are you fitting your unique skill set into that environment?
Oftentimes you have to sell a home wherever you are to buy your next home. I've got my first time home buyer crowd over in Fayetteville. I've got my move up buyers here in the Southern Pines area, and the folks in between, and in Rayford and up in the Spring Lake area. And that's what I love about it, is every client is different. Every deal is different. There's a huge knowledge piece to it. So I've made myself an expert around VA loans.
You've spent about 2 years or so in the actual military, in the Navy.
Yep.
Correct? Or it was the Navy, not the Air Force?
Yeah, it was the Navy. Yeah.
Right. And what I hear from you, I heard love of country come up a couple of times. So it's apparent to me, or it seems to me, that ultimately you're still in a serving mode. You're still in a giving back. How can I help? Whether it's helping someone in the military, but you're ultimately still serving in that respect, I think, as well, which I think is quite admirable. I think it's really great.
It's really cool to be able to understand, like, being part of that community and what the families go through.
Yeah.
And to still be a part of it. Special things for my military clients. There are certain things I'll pay for them, or if I'm listing a house, I give them a special rate. Just different things I can do to try to ease their burden. And so I still get that leadership piece too. And from being at a big firm, I'm able to help other agents who are growing. So there is a lot of service and fulfillment in this. And in building this niche, I often think that things kind of happen by accident. They're just, you end up where you're supposed to be. I really wasn't sure if I was going to leverage the veteran thing too much. I feel like I didn't really do that much. I wanted to, but I never got to be in the fleet or, be working close air support for any of our teams on the ground. So to be able to help them from this perspective is huge. I'm grateful for that opportunity. And I didn't mean to become the military go-to, but it happened.
I'm a firm believer in that you will attract the things that you set your mind to. And I'm a firm believer in the science behind that too, because, when somebody gets to a very determined mindset, they ultimately start shifting their behaviors, even their micro behaviors and their micro expressions, the way they hold themselves, that eventually will get them closer to their goals. So, that's the science behind it. And now you've aligned yourself to be able to maximize your own set of skills.
And I love that law of attraction, because there might have been some subconscious to it. I
bet there's a lot of subconscious to it.
Right? My authentic self, the more it was like, okay, these are the kind of buyers and sellers I'm attracting. Just from, I'll talk about everything I do on social media. I like to educate people. And it ended up being that if I was doing things around the military, I'm teaching about them, and I wanted to teach people about this area. And of course, there's the golf aspect. But between you, me, and the tree, I don't have the time or the money to go play golf.
My purpose here is that maybe there is a young woman out there, or a young girl, who is kind of getting to where you might have been in the past. What can you tell that young person that's going to help them as they move forward in their life?
When you're afraid, lean into it. Keep putting yourself and your child first, doing the same things over and over.
Expecting a different result.
So change. Be better.
I've got it on my wall back there. You can't see it in this shot, but the world changes. Don't be afraid to change with it.
And don't be afraid to take risks. And as long as you keep waking up and staying in the fight, just get back up. It's all going to be okay. It can't not be okay if you're trying. That's the deal. It just cannot not be okay if you're trying. I promise you that.
All right. Well, let's call that a wrap on this.
Okay. That's right.
Thank you so much for being with me on the Rugged Human podcast, because everything that I consider to be a rugged human, I think you exhibiting all of that, whether it's, self-examination, whether it's always learning, whether it's trying to make yourself better, and whether it's finding balance. That's my big shtick on this for the most part, is finding some balance in life, right? That feels good when you get to that place.
And you'll get there.
And you're in the middle, right?
Yep. But I've been in the other places. Just stay in the fight. You'll get there. You'll find that balance.